What if the veil of grandeur shrouding the Roman Empire conceals an abyss of dark secrets? Behind the facade of colossal monuments and triumphant victories lies a narrative steeped in blood and brutality, one that few dare to expose. Instead of the familiar tales of military triumphs and architectural marvels, today we turn our gaze to the atrocities committed by Rome in the name of preserving its power. From forgotten genocides to chilling spectacles of death, played out before exultant crowds. For within the annals of Roman history are pages stained with shadows that even the noblest marble cannot conceal. Prepare yourselves, for what is revealed here may forever alter your perception of ancient Rome. Let us light the torches and venture into the Roman darkness. The scorching sun blazes across the Mediterranean, and the ashes of war blanket the ruins of a once great civilization. Carthage, a city that once challenged Rome in trade, naval power, and political influence, now stands on the brink of total annihilation. Not merely conquered or subjugated, but utterly erased from the face of the earth. For over a century, Rome and Carthage waged the bloody Punic Wars, which have become legend. However, in the final, Third War, the Romans deemed a simple victory insufficient. Their aim was not merely a peace agreement, but vengeance, a desire to wipe Carthage's name from the earth, to expunge it from the memory of future generations. Publius Cornelius Scipio, the Roman general, was chosen to execute this merciless mission. For over 2 years, the people of Carthage offered desperate resistance, fueled by hunger, pride, and a faint glimmer of hope. But when the city walls fell, a horrifying slaughter ensued beyond all description. An estimated 150,000 people perished in the streets. Blood drenched the temples, flames engulfed the libraries, and death cries drowned in the corridors of a city realizing its final moments. The survivors, some 50,000 people including women, children, and priests, were chained and forced into slavery. Carthage was not merely defeated, it was humiliated and trampled underfoot. But Rome did not stop there. In an act brimming with symbolism and ominous foreboding, the Romans ordered the land of Carthage to be sown with salt. This was a clear message: nothing would ever grow here again. No villages, no temples, not even the memory of its past glory. Modern historians classify this deed as genocide. Rome, however, called it glory. And for centuries, this fact was suppressed, as if brutality could be hidden behind marble columns. But history remembers everything. The ashes of Carthage still cry out, if there are those willing to hear their voice. The ancient Appian Way, an artery binding the Roman Empire together, symbolized power and relentless progress. However, in 71 BC, this road transformed into an ominous corridor, where thousands of crucified bodies stood like silent gravestones along its entire length, serving as a grim warning. It all began with a revolt. Spartacus, a gladiator from Thrace, broke free from slavery with a handful of like-minded individuals. What started as a desperate escape attempt escalated into a full-scale rebellion. Soon, over 100,000 slaves, yearning for freedom and dignity, joined him, seeking to shatter the chains of the era's most formidable empire. For 2 years, the rebels achieved victories over Roman legions, set villas ablaze, and terrorized the nobility. Rome was disgraced, unable to tolerate that slaves, whom it considered inferior beings, mocked its might. It then dispatched Marcus Licinius Crassus, an ambitious and ruthless general, with one sole objective: to crush the rebellion at any cost. And he accomplished his task. Spartacus fell in battle, and the survivors were captured. Then followed a brutal reprisal. Crassus ordered 6,000 captives to be crucified along the Appian Way, for nearly 200 kilometers, from Rome to Capua. Each execution was a tragic tale of torment, people decomposing under the scorching sun, bodies ravaged by crows, and eyes fixed on the abyss, into the silence of the ages. Crucifixion was not merely an act of taking a life, but a prolonged and torturous execution designed to instill fear and dread. The Roman Empire sought not only to punish offenders, but to do so as a deterrent, so that everyone would see and remember the consequences of defiance. And this strategy proved effective. Slave revolts were brutally suppressed, but historical memory preserved the gruesome image of thousands of crosses, like sinister shadows stretching along the roads. The Via Appia, once a symbol of Roman grandeur, became a silent witness to the price of striving for freedom. In the very heart of Rome stood the colossal Colosseum, a stone echo of its era. This magnificent amphitheater was conceived not only as an architectural marvel, but also as a venue to satisfy humanity's eternal thirst for spectacle and blood. Here, before a vast crowd of 50 to 100,000 spectators, death ceased to be a tragedy, transforming instead into a thrilling performance. From sunrise, the stands would fill with jubilant and excited people. They came not for poetry or art, but to witness death. In the arena, beneath the scorching sun, humans confronted wild beasts, fought each other in merciless gladiatorial contests, or endured elaborate executions staged as theatrical performances. The Roman Empire transformed cruelty into a public ritual, cynically dubbing it bread and circuses. Gladiators, contrary to romanticized notions, were not voluntary heroes of the arena. For the most part, they were unfortunate prisoners of war, slaves, or condemned criminals, whom a merciless fate compelled to fight to the death. Some were given a chance at survival through combat training, whilst others were merely handed weapons and a fleeting hope of salvation. Many of these unfortunates passed away without glory or recognition, their names and deeds forever buried in the sands of history. Those who managed to survive, whether through luck or inherent ferocity, might earn the fleeting sympathy of the crowd, yet they remained someone else's property forever. It is worth noting that gladiatorial contests were far from always fair or just. In the Venetians, these brutal shows, wild animals such as ferocious tigers, mighty lions, and enormous bears would be unleashed upon defenseless, unarmed people. At times, mythological narratives were transformed into mass executions, designed to entertain the public. Spectators, gripped by a thirst for blood, would laugh, applaud, and demand even more spectacle. In this cruel amusement, the true soul of the empire was reflected, one that, behind its luxurious togas and marble palaces, concealed a heart hardened by centuries of violence and bloodshed. For ancient Rome, the arena served as a vivid symbol of its boundless power and might. It was believed that whoever could kill had the right to rule, and the populace, engrossed in bloody spectacles, forgot about pressing issues such as hunger, poverty, and oppression. Today, we gaze with admiration upon the majestic ruins of the Colosseum, this symbol of a bygone empire. Yet, beneath these ancient stones, the cries of thousands of innocent victims still echo, those who gave their lives to entertain the Roman nobility and common folk. For in ancient Rome, the most captivating and desired spectacle was death itself. Death for beliefs. During the flourishing period of the Roman Empire, as its dominions expanded, so too did the need for total control over territories, resources, and the minds of its subjects. The emergence of a new community, preaching principles that ran contrary to imperial customs, equality, modesty, the worship of a single god superior to the emperor, was perceived by Rome not as a mere religious disagreement, but as a direct threat to the empire's very existence. Thus began an era of unprecedented persecution. Christians, who refused to bow before Roman gods and deify the emperor, were branded as traitors, fanatics, and disturbers of public order. In the eyes of the populace, they became the scapegoats for fires, epidemics, and other inexplicable calamities. For the rulers, they transformed into unseen enemies, subject to complete eradication. Emperor Nero was the first to unleash a bloody terror. After the devastating fire of 64 AD that engulfed Rome, he sought a scapegoat to deflect public anger from himself. And Christians, a small and misunderstood group, became the ideal target for accusations. They were arrested, subjected to brutal torture, and executed in the most sophisticated ways. Some were crucified, others, smeared with pitch, were burned alive, transformed into living torches to illuminate the imperial gardens at night. A third group was thrown to hungry wild beasts in the arena, amidst the exultant cries of the crowd. And all of this was not for crimes committed, but for their adherence to their faith, in the name of conviction. Yet, the fiercer the persecutions became, the stronger their faith grew. Public executions not only failed to silence their teachings, but imbued them with new power. Tales of their martyrdom, passed down by word of mouth, inspired others to resist, for in the face of inevitable death, Christians did not renounce their beliefs, but departed this life with prayers on their lips. The Roman Empire sought to suppress their voices with cries of pain, but instead, it sowed a seed that proved indestructible. Today, the martyrs of that era not only remain in memory, but also serve as a symbol of resistance that even the most merciless flames could not break. Jerusalem, a city sacred to many, had endured numerous invasions and wars. But in 70 AD, even its ancient walls could not withstand the merciless might of Rome. What transpired there was not merely an act of suppression, but a formidable warning to the entire world. The conflict erupted when the Jews, exhausted by Roman domination, political oppression, and religious discrimination, rose in revolt. They sought to reclaim their independence, their faith, and their dignity. For many years, they waged a fierce struggle against the imperial legions, engaging in an unequal but desperate fight. In 70 AD, a tragedy unfolded that left an indelible mark on the history of the Jewish people. After several years of escalating tension and open rebellion against Roman rule, Judea revolted. But the forces were unequal, and the outcome was predetermined in a brutal struggle. Emperor Vespasian, recognizing the gravity of the situation, dispatched his son Titus at the head of the Roman legions to quell the rebellion. Titus, renowned for his ruthlessness, showed no mercy. The Roman army unleashed its full might upon Jerusalem, subjecting the city to a prolonged and merciless siege. The Romans cut off all entrances and supply routes, condemning the inhabitants to starvation and despair. Within the city walls, entire families perished from exhaustion, unable to fight. Any attempt to escape was brutally suppressed. Fugitives were crucified on crosses before the city walls, reminding others of their inevitable punishment. Ultimately, Roman soldiers managed to breach the defenses, and Jerusalem was engulfed in flames. Herod's temple, a sacred site and the spiritual heart of the Jewish people, was plundered and destroyed. Roman soldiers stormed the city like enraged beasts, perpetrating mass killings, looting, and arson. The historian Josephus, an eyewitness to this catastrophe, left a gruesome account of a city strewn with corpses and air thick with smoke and blood. Over 1 million people perished or were enslaved. The city, once a spiritual capital, was reduced to ashes and ruins. But the most terrible consequence was not merely the physical destruction, but the expulsion. The Roman Empire scattered the Jewish people across all corners of its territory, depriving them of their land, their temple, and their center of national identity. The destruction of Jerusalem became an unhealing wound, bleeding for centuries. And although the Roman Empire has long vanished from the face of the earth, the tragic repercussions of this event still resonate in world history. The Roman Empire, renowned for its grandeur and brilliance, rose upon a foundation of extensive exploitation that spanned all its dominions. The majestic city of Rome, with its temples, palaces, marble monuments, and roads, was erected thanks to the tireless labor of millions of slaves. Slavery was not merely a workforce, but the cornerstone of the Roman economy. Slaves were used everywhere, in agriculture, construction, mining, and craft production. The Romans built their power and prosperity by exploiting these individuals, deprived of freedom and human dignity. Slaves were considered property, possessed no rights, and were stripped of any hope for an improved fate. Many were captured in war, others born into bondage, but all shared a rightless existence. They toiled in inhumane conditions, spending long hours without rest, often subjected to brutal corporal punishment. During the execution of massive construction projects, such as the Colosseum, many of these individuals perished, remaining nameless victims of imperial grandeur. The names of these people are forever lost in the annals of history. Their lives became a silent sacrifice on the altar of Rome's greatness. Historians estimate that the construction of the Colosseum required the efforts of tens of thousands of workers, a significant portion of whom were slaves, stripped of all freedom. The Roman Empire elevated labor exploitation to the level of state policy, creating an extensive system of slavery that permeated all spheres of society. However, the sacrifices made by slaves remained in the shadow of imperial splendor, as if the massive stones of the Colosseum could forever conceal the wounds of those who erected that magnificence. Contemplating the ruins of a bygone empire, modern individuals must remember the true architects of Rome. They were not emperors and senators, but those who were deprived of freedom and human dignity, whose blood and sweat became the very foundation of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire asserted its dominance not only through military might and cultural influence, but also through pervasive fear. Terror served as a potent instrument in the hands of emperors, who understood that the brutal suppression of any dissent was key to absolute control over a vast territory. Roman punitive measures instilled horror in the populace, ensuring unquestioning obedience. In ancient Rome, torture served not only as a tool for extracting confessions, but also as a means of public humiliation. The Romans transformed suffering into a spectacle, an instructive performance accessible for all to witness. Those who dared to defy the established order or committed crimes were subjected to severe punishments that unfolded in the city squares, serving as a reminder of Rome's omnipotence. Crucifixion, one of the most inhumane executions, was not merely a punishment but an act of public torture. Victims, slowly dying, appeared before exultant crowds, enduring endless torment. The cross became a symbol not only of death, but also of utter contempt for human dignity. Flogging was also widespread. Prisoners and slaves were subjected to brutal beatings before execution or dispatch to forced labor. The Roman would not only inflict deep wounds, but also aimed to break the will of the condemned. However, Roman authorities were not limited to physical torture alone. Emperors and rulers employed the so-called principle of bread and circuses to manage the populace. Gladiatorial contests, the baiting of wild beasts, and public execution served as vivid reminders of Rome's capacity to inflict pain and suffering. And the crowd, gripped by a thirst for blood, demanded new spectacles. The eternal city, Rome, with its colossal influence and dazzling grandeur, rose upon a foundation steeped in the blood and tears of those who dared to defy its indomitable might. In the arenas of battle, in the majestic Colosseums, and even on the cobbled streets of the capital, cruelty and torment became an integral part of daily life, shaping the moral fabric and order within the vast empire. But Rome did not merely expand its dominions. It methodically stripped conquered peoples of their distinctiveness, cultural heritage, and sense of self-worth. And whilst the Romans proudly proclaimed their ability to integrate and civilize vanquished nations, the true objective lay in suppressing and eradicating any manifestation of cultural and religious independence amongst subject peoples. The Gauls, Germans, Celts, and Britons, These are just a few of those who fell under the heavy Roman yoke. Each invasion meant not only the seizure of territories, but also the systematic destruction of their traditions, languages, and spiritual values. Rome, with its imperial culture and politicized religion, entertained no thought of allowing these peoples to live according to their own beliefs. Roman civilization, in essence, was an instrument of domination, imposed with merciless cruelty and relentless force. The Roman Empire, in expanding its borders, ruthlessly suppressed the identity of conquered peoples. Take, for instance, the Gauls, who bravely fought under Vercingetorix in the Gallic Wars to preserve their distinctiveness and land. However, after their defeat, Rome not only annexed their territory but deliberately destroyed their cultural heritage. Latin was imposed as the official language, and their temples and sacred sites were demolished. The Gallic people were forced to adopt Roman customs, whilst those who resisted faced a cruel fate, death, slavery, or exile. A similar fate befell the Germanic and Celtic tribes, whose lands fell under the onslaught of Roman legions. The Romans did not limit themselves to seizing political power. They also destroyed religious sanctuaries and stripped these peoples of their history. The conquerors transformed them into pale shadows of their former selves, forcibly integrating them into an empire that did not recognize their dignity or cultural value. However, the greatest danger to Rome was not so much physical resistance as cultural resistance. The empire feared the resilience of the traditions and beliefs of conquered peoples. For if their spirit remained unbroken, their culture and self-awareness would continue to live, challenging Roman dominance. This is precisely why Roman civilization sought to erase any traces of previous cultures. In Rome's history, civilization became an instrument for suppressing those who dared to defy its authority, depriving them of memory and voice. Subjugated peoples lost not only their land but also their dignity, transforming into a faceless mass, obedient to the will of the empire. Ancient Rome, having ascended to the peak of its power, employed not only military might to maintain control, but also resorted to entertainment as an effective instrument of social control. The inhabitants of the empire, despite its grandeur and influence, faced internal problems including poverty, hunger, and oppression. The rulers of Rome found a cynical way to divert the people's attention from these issues: the spectacle of death. Roman amphitheaters, amongst which the Colosseum stood out in its magnificence, served not merely as venues for entertainment. They transformed into true theaters of violence, designed to quell popular unrest and redirect the attention of the masses to the brutal scenes unfolding in the arena. Spilled blood became not only a form of punishment, but also a means of maintaining strict control over society. Gladiatorial contests, venations, the baiting of wild beasts, staged battles with exotic animals, and public executions became commonplace, an integral part of daily Roman life. Imperial strategists understood that by captivating the populace with the spectacle of death and the suffering of others, they could alleviate social tension. This served not only as punishment for criminals or slaves, but also as a demonstration of the empire's unwavering strength and authority. Gladiators, destined for deadly combat in the arena, were not voluntary heroes. They were largely captives, slaves, and convicted criminals, men and women forced to fight to sate the bloodthirsty appetites of the crowd. Some underwent special training, while others were simply thrown into the arena with weapons, hoping to survive long enough to leave an impression on the spectators. Yet, even those who managed to survive remained merely the property of the empire, their fate predetermined. The thirst for blood in ancient Rome knew no bounds, and was not confined to the gladiatorial arena. Defenseless captives often fell victim to wild beasts, lions, tigers, and bears, unleashed into the arena for public entertainment. Spectators greeted this brutal slaughter with jubilation, and the spilled blood served not merely as entertainment, but as an embodiment of Rome's boundless might. While the populace indulged in festivities, watching the suffering, the Roman elite deftly exploited this situation to solidify their power and avert civil unrest. The cunning manipulation of public opinion through these bloodthirsty spectacles proved so effective that instead of critically assessing their own plight, the Roman people felt a sense of belonging to the empire's greatness, intertwined with its violence. An empire founded on cruelty was presented as the pinnacle of civilization, achieved at the cost of the suffering and blood of the vanquished. Rome left behind an impressive legacy: bridges, roads, and laws that profoundly influenced the modern world. This civilization, once admired for its grandeur, order, and might, like any empire, built its legacy heedless of the casualties. And these casualties were the blood, oppression, and destruction of those who dared to resist its expansion. For centuries, the Roman Empire ruthlessly annihilated entire civilizations, eradicated religious beliefs, and exterminated peoples who fell under its dominion. From the horrific genocide of Carthage to the mass executions of Christians, from the public humiliation of rebels to the brutal exploitation of slave labor, the Roman Empire rose upon a foundation steeped in fear and the blood of its victims. And today, as one's gaze sweeps across the magnificent ruins of the Colosseum, the Roman Forum, and the temples that still stand proud in the heart of Rome, we see not merely silent stones and cold marble. We see a living memory of those sacrificed at the altar of imperial grandeur. Within these ancient walls, the shadows of thousands of innocent victims seem to linger, whose tragic fates were mercilessly silenced by the thunderous roar of the jubilant crowd and the deafening applause of spectators who reveled in death and suffering. The empire bequeathed to us by the Romans is not solely about triumphant battlefield victories and astounding engineering feats that capture the imagination. It is also an empire of forgotten victims, of peoples erased from the face of the earth, and of lost souls who became the unwitting price for so-called civilizational progress. The history of Rome is a harsh lesson in the nature of power and oppression, about how an empire can become a legend, but at the cost of countless lives. Even today, Rome's glory continues to live in the minds of those who enthusiastically study its history, yet so too do the voices of those who never had the chance to tell their own story. The ashes of Carthage, the ominous shadows wandering along the Appian Way, the faint whispers still echoing within the ancient stones of the Colosseum, all serve as an eternal reminder that no empire can last forever, and that the price of glory can often be exorbitant. The grandeur of Rome, still admired today, has left an indelible mark on human history. Its legal codes, triumphant conquests, innovative engineering solutions, and monumental architecture bear witness to the empire's power and ambition. Yet, behind this dazzling facade of glory lies a dark and convoluted narrative, replete with suffering and sacrifice. The echoes of those who fell under the wheels of Roman expansion, whose lives were offered at the altar of power, still resonate within the ancient stones, preserving the memory of what once was. This immersion into the ruthless world of the Roman Empire offers us a harsh, yet crucial, lesson. No empire, however mighty, is immune to oblivion. Roman civilization undoubtedly reached unprecedented heights, but the price paid for this grandeur by countless individuals was exorbitant and stained with blood. And today, as we gaze upon the majestic ruins of the Colosseum, we must remember that we hear not only the whistle of the wind, but also the muffled groans of those who gave their lives defending their honor and dignity, those whose names were erased from the pages of history while Rome rejoiced in its triumph. What conclusions, then, can we draw from their tragic fates? Are we prepared to continue paying such a high price for ephemeral glory and dubious grandeur?